Let us discuss about JSX. What is React and what is JSX? As we know, React is a JavaScript library for building UI components. In web applications, we express our UI using HTML. In React, we write our HTML using JSX. JSX ultimately gets converted to HTML. So we write JSX and JSX ultimately gets converted to HTML. So you can say that in React, we express our UI using JSX. Now let us discuss a few points about JSX. Writing JSX is mostly like writing HTML. There are a few things that we have to remember about JSX syntax. One of them is that every JSX expression should have one root element. Let us take a look at an example. This is a JSX expression, and you can see that there is one root tag, which is a div tag over here. Another point to remember is that we should not have single or double quotes enclosing the JSX expressions. You can see that there are no single quotes or double quotes at the beginning or at the end of the JSX expression over here. And similarly over here also. You can see that there are no single or double quotes at the beginning or at the end of the JSX expressions. Let us next discuss about brackets. Brackets are needed if the root tag and the equals operator are on different lines. Let's examine this point. Here in this example, we have the equals operator over here and the root tag right next to it on the same line. So we don't need to use brackets. And in this example, we have the equals operator over here and the root tag in the next line. So we have used the brackets to enclose the JSX expression. Here we have the equals operator and the root tag on the same line, so we don't need to use brackets. And over here we have the equals operator and the root tag on different lines, so we need to use the brackets to wrap the JSX expression. Let us modify the previous example by pulling the root tag onto the same line as the equals operator. So here we have the equals operator and the root tag on the same line now. Hence we can skip the brackets. If you observe here, there are no brackets after the equals operator, and also observe that there are no single quotes or double quotes anywhere. What is the recommended usage of brackets then? The recommended usage is to skip the brackets for single lines, for example over here. And if we have multiple lines, we should use the brackets like over here. Next, let us discuss how to embed expressions in JSX. The syntax for embedding expressions is we use the curly braces, and within the curly braces we place the expression. So this is the syntax for embedding expressions in JSX. Let us look at an example. Here we have const name equals Tom Sawyer, which is a string. So the expression is a string whose value is Tom Sawyer. So we have the variable name and we want to embed it within this JSX expression, which is on the right side of the equals operator. So what we do is we take name and we enclose it within curly braces like this. So the syntax again is we use curly braces, and within the curly braces we place our expression. If you remember, we discussed about JavaScript expressions while discussing template literals, and I mentioned that you can think of JavaScript expression as anything that you put on the right hand side of the equals operator. Let us look at one more example. Here we have two variables, fname and lname, and in this third line of code we are concatenating them and assigning that value to full name. Observe that we are actually doing string interpolation using template literals over here, and what we want to do is we want to embed this full name variable within this JSX expression, which is highlighted over here. So to do that, we wrap the variable using curly braces. So we have full name variable over here, and we have full name within curly braces over here, and we have embedded our variable within a JSX expression. Let's discuss this one more time. We use dollar and curly braces to do string interpolation within template literals, and we use just the curly braces to embed expressions in JSX. Please note that JSX is an expression too. Here we have the equals operator, and on the right side we have a JSX expression. So in this example, we have assigned a JSX expression to the variable element1. And in this example, we have assigned this JSX expression to the variable element2. Since JSX is an expression, we can also return it as a return value of a function. So here in this function getGreeting, we are returning some JSX. As you can see, the return value is JSX. This syntax is possible because this highlighted code over here is one JSX expression. Is JSX exactly 100% like HTML? Writing JSX is mostly like writing HTML. Before we discuss JSX any further, we have to discuss about HTML attributes and JavaScript properties. Let's take a look at an example. By the way, this is the browser developer tools and I have the console tab selected. And the web page I have open is reactjs.org/docs/introducing-jsx.html. This page over here has an element with this particular ID. So if we write document.getElement by ID and give that ID over here, we can get hold of that element within this variable element over here. And as you can see, this is that element. It is a div and it has three attributes. The first one is style, the second one is tab index, and the third one is ID. Let's focus on this tab index attribute. What I want to do here is I want to get hold of this tab index's value, which is -1 over here. So if I write here element dot tab index like this, actually I get a value of undefined. But if I write element dot tab index with an uppercase I, then I get the correct value of -1. So this is correct while this is wrong. Now why is this? This is because the tab index over here is the HTML attribute and its corresponding JavaScript property is tab index with an uppercase I. So every HTML attribute will have a corresponding JavaScript property, but it does not necessarily have to be the same name, as we have seen here with the example of tab index. An example of a HTML attribute whose JavaScript property name is the same is ID over here. So if we write element.id, we get back Gatsby focus wrapper. So some HTML attributes have JavaScript properties with the same name like ID over here, while there are other HTML attributes which have different JavaScript property names like tab index over here. Most HTML attributes have the same JavaScript property names, example, ID, name, etc., while some attributes have different JavaScript property names, example, class. For them, JSX is different. Let us look at some examples where attributes and property names are different. On the left, we have some HTML attributes, and on the right, we have the corresponding JavaScript property names. The first one is class, and the corresponding JavaScript property name is class name. Next, we have tab index, and the corresponding JavaScript property name, as we have seen, is tab index with an uppercase I. And over here, we have the onClick event. Strictly speaking, onClick within HTML and onClick within JavaScript are the same, but React gives us something called synthetic events which wrap around these onClick events, and we will be using these synthetic events. So for the purposes of writing JSX, you have to remember that just like attributes have corresponding JavaScript property names, similarly these events have corresponding synthetic events. Now, why are we discussing HTML attributes and corresponding JavaScript property names? We have been discussing them because JSX gets compiled to react.createElement calls. Babel compiles JSX to react.createElement calls. What do we mean by that? It means that JSX gets compiled to JavaScript. So essentially, when we are writing JSX, we are actually writing JavaScript. Let us look at an example of a JSX expression. Here we have a JSX expression. We have the h1 tag, and then we have the attribute class name. If you remember, we discussed that class name is a JavaScript property, and it is the corresponding property for the HTML attribute class. So when we write class name over here, that means we are writing the JavaScript property name and not the HTML attribute class. So this is one very important way in which writing HTML and writing JSX differ. So we are actually writing the JavaScript property names within JSX and not the HTML attributes. Let's see what this JSX gets converted to. below we have the resulting JavaScript. As you can see, this JSX expression over here gets converted into a react.createElement call. And the first argument of this react.createElement call is the name of the tag h1. So the first argument is the name of the tag. And the second argument is the list of attributes. Here in this example, we have one attribute called class name. So the second argument is a list of key value pairs with all the attributes that are specified over here. Here we have only one attribute, so we have only one key value pair. If we had more attributes over here, we will have their corresponding key value pairs within this object over here. So the second argument is an object with a list of attributes. And then the third argument over here is the children. Here in this JSX expression, we have one child which is a text node, hello world, and that becomes the third argument to this create element call. Let's discuss this one more time. The first argument will be the name of the tag. The second argument will be an object with a list of attributes as key value pairs. And then the rest of the arguments will be the children within the root tag. While discussing this example, I was referring to class name as an attribute over here. I have listed class name as attributes over here. But actually in JSX, we refer to them as props. As we have been discussing, while writing JSX, we do not write HTML attributes, but we write their corresponding JavaScript properties, and that is what we refer to as props. We call them props because they are JavaScript properties. Let us look at one more example. Here in this example, we have more children within the root tag. So we have a root tag which is a div, so that becomes the first argument for the react.createElement call. And then the second argument is the list of props. Here we have two props. The first prop is ID and the second prop is class name, and that becomes an object over here. As you can see, these are the props. And then we have three children over here, and those become the rest of the arguments for the react.createElement call. So these three arguments represent the children. The first child is a text node which is hello world, and the second child is a break tag, and its corresponding JavaScript is react.createElement, and the first argument is br, which signifies the tag, and the second argument is null because this tag does not have any props, and the third child is a span tag. Let's look at its corresponding JavaScript. So it has its own react.createElement call, and the first argument is span to signify the tag. The second argument is null because there are no props over here, and the third argument is React is awesome, which is the text node, which is the child of the span tag over here. So is JSX exactly like HTML? We can say that JSX is mostly like writing HTML. While HTML tags use HTML attributes like class, JSX tags use JS properties, also called props. So we have the HTML attribute class over here and the corresponding prop class name over here. And remember that while reading JSX, we refer to what look like attributes in HTML. We refer to them as props. So here we have a h1 tag with one prop called class name. Now that we have understood the importance of JavaScript properties, should we learn JavaScript property names of all HTML attributes? And the answer is no, because many HTML attributes and JavaScript property names are the same. And there is a simple trick in case they are different. If we try the camel case version of the HTML attribute, we usually get the JavaScript property name. Let's quickly discuss about camel case. There are different ways of combining words, and here I have listed a few options. The first option is camel case. If we use camel case, then when we combine words, the first letter of the first word will be lowercase, while the first letter of all the remaining words will be uppercase, like this. If we use Pascal case, the first letter of all of the words will be uppercase. If we use snake case, we join all of the words using the underscore and all of the letters will be lowercase. And if we use kebab case, we join the words using the hyphen and all of the letters will be lowercase. So JavaScript property names use the camel case notation. An example is font size, and an example of kebab case is CSS. where font-size is a style attribute. So the corresponding JavaScript property of font-size is font size in camel case. So whenever we see multiple words within HTML attributes or CSS, all we have to do is write the camel case versions of them, and we will usually end up with the correct JavaScript property names. Let's look at some examples. So we have the tab index HTML attribute here, and the corresponding JSX prop will be the camel case version of tab index, which means our I will be uppercase. Here we have the CSS attribute font-size, and the JSX prop will be the camel case version of this, which is font size with an uppercase S. And our event names will have corresponding synthetic events, and these synthetic events will also use camel case versions like this. All in all, we have to remember that when writing JSX, we will be using camel case notation a lot. Let us also discuss some special cases. There are a few reserved words in JavaScript like class and for, and unfortunately those are HTML attributes as well. In such cases, we have to look up what is the corresponding JavaScript property name. Fortunately, this is a very small list, and usually we encounter only these two examples. One is class, and we have to use class name for it, and the second is for, and we have to use the corresponding JSX prop HTML for. We use them quite a lot, so it is probably worth noting them down somewhere. So we have to use class name for the class attribute, and we have to use HTML for the for attribute.